Warbonds and Helldivers 2 come in all shapes and sizes, some good and some bad. In this video, we're going to go over every Warbond up until this point and throw it into a tier list for new and Xbox players. This list will be excluding the ODST Legendary Warbond. That Legendary Warbond is a first of its kind, but by the end of this video, you should at least have an idea of which Warbond to prioritize and which to leave in the armory. Real quick, what is a Warbond? Warbonds are like season passes that don't expire. So once you purchase them, you keep them to progress whenever you want. You purchase these Warbonds with super credits, which you can earn by simply playing the game or buying in the in-game store. Once you unlock a Warbond, you progress it by spending medals. Medals you earn by playing, doing personal orders, or by the community succeeding in major orders. Now, disclaimer before we get into the list. We're going to be going through these pretty fast, and I'll be picking things that I like in each of the Warbonds. If you see something you think you'd enjoy, don't let this video or any video tell you how to play the game. Everything in this game is viable on the highest tier of difficulty. The goal of this video is just to give you an idea of what the Warbonds have to offer, but as always, just have fun. So starting off the list, we're starting with the Steeled Veterans Warbond. So first off with this Warbond, we get the Senator. This is one of the best secondaries in the game, and it's a revolver, so you get the cool factor on top of it, but heavy penetration, this thing is an absolute powerhouse for the secondary slot, and a personal favorite of mine. Next up, we have the Liberator Concussive, and exactly 3 Helldivers in the whole community love to use this thing. For everybody else, this is a very underwhelming weapon. It focuses more on pushing enemies and a little bit of crowd control, but in my opinion, just not very satisfying to use. Next up, let's talk about the armor you get. As far as the armor passive, you get servo assisted, which is going to give you an increase with your throwing range and provides 50% more limb health. This is overall pretty good. On the second page here, we get the Incendiary Grenade. This thing is actually a pretty good throwable and one of my favorites when it comes to like a fire grenade, so a very solid throwable here. And the second primary weapon we get with this Warbond is the Breaker Incendiary. This used to be one of the best primaries in the game when it comes to taking out chaff. And although it's not at the height that it used to be, this is a very above average primary weapon, and it feels really satisfying to light a bunch of chaff on fire very easily. On the third page, we do get a booster. This is the flexible reinforcement budget, but honestly, with boosters in general, unless they're exceptional, I'm not going to point them out. This is not an exceptional booster. It's very, I would say, middle of the road, if not mediocre. But we do get our third primary weapon in the Jar 5 Dominator. Now, this weapon is a little unwieldy for new players, but once you get used to it, it is an absolute powerhouse, and the medium penetration on it, ooh, a really, really good primary weapon here. So when it comes to ranking the Steeled Veterans Warbond, you get a lot of really good, solid primary weapons out of it. You also get one of the best sidearms in the game with the Senator. So because of how many weapons you get, and one of them being absolutely S tier, I have to stick Steeled Veterans here in the A tier. Next up, we have the Cutting Edge Warbond. On the first page, you pick up the primary weapon, the LAS-16 Sickle. This is one of the best light penetration weapons in the game for your primary slot. Technically, this is a primary weapon you will never have to reload because it has a heat sink instead of a magazine, but that does require a little bit of trigger discipline, but the damage coupled with the fire rate makes this thing an absolute powerhouse, and it essentially has no recoil. Now, this Warbond actually provides a pretty nice armor passive here in Electrical Conduit, so it provides 95% resistance to arc damage. There are a lot of volatile arc weapons in this game, so if you pair it with this armor here, you're going to be a tough son of a bitch to kill with arc weapons. On the second page here, we get the G23 Stun Grenade. This is actually a really good stun grenade for crowd control and setting up kills, easy kills against heavy targets. It does focus on crowd control, and that's not necessarily everybody's cup of soup. Cup of soup, I think I mean cup of tea, right? Anyways, our second primary weapon we pick up is the Punisher Plasma. This is a workhorse weapon, has explosive damage and medium penetration, has a little bit of a learning curve with how to shoot this weapon because it has an arcing shot, but make no mistake, this is a fantastic primary weapon against every faction. Moving on to the third page, we get a secondary in the form of the Las Dagger. Some people really like this sidearm. I do not. Nonetheless, it's not bad, but it's just not my favorite. Thankfully, on this third page, we get our third primary weapon in the form of the Arc Blitzer. This is an amazing primary weapon that virtually will stun lock every chaff enemy in the game, and you'll never have to reload. It is considered a close range weapon, kind of like an arc shotgun, but against particularly fast moving, annoying enemies, this primary weapon tears through them. So overall, when it comes to the cutting edge here, because of how many excellent primary weapons this Warbond gives you, I have to put it into S tier. Moving on to the third Warbond on the list, and oh hell yeah, it's democratic detonation. On the first page here, we have the best throwable in the game, and that is the thermite. This grenade is a sticky grenade that does a shit ton of damage that kills massive and heavy targets really fast. And also on the first page, we have the Adjudicator. This is a decent, I would say above average AR with medium penetration. Has a little bit of a kick, but a lot of fun to use. On the second page, we have the Eruptor. This is a bolt action explosive sniper. I've done a whole video talking about how good this weapon is. TLDR, it fucking rocks. Wrapping this Warbond up with the third page, we have again one of the best secondaries in the game in the form of the grenade pistol. This is amazing utility with the fact that it does explosive damage and is pretty good at killing enemies in a pinch. Now lastly with this Warbond that I want to talk about is the exploding crossbow. Again, kind of like the Eruptor, this is one of the best primaries in the game. And I know you probably hear me saying that a lot, but explosive damage is really just that good. I know it's probably hard for some of you to tell, but democratic detonation, this is an S tier Warbond, and I strongly recommend picking up this Warbond first. Easy S tier. Next on our list is the Polar Patriots Premium Warbond. On the first page, we have a pretty decent AR in the form of the Tenderizer. I would say this is kind of middle of the road, a little bit above average. This is a powerful light penetration rifle, but the magazine size kind of holds it back. Next up on the second page, we have one of my favorite weapons, and that is the Pummeler. This is a SMG that has a little bit of a crowd control effect where it stuns targets and lets you really line up those precision shots really easily. This SMG is really good at fast moving enemies, something like Gloomstalkers or Hunters, but because it has that stun and that crowd control effect, it's really not everybody's cup of tea. And on the second page, we also get our throwable, which is just the incendiary impact, kind of like the other incendiary on the Steel Veterans, but this time when you throw it, as soon as it hits something, it immediately explodes. Fire grenades are good in Helldivers too, so thumbs up. And on the last page, we get yet another excellent primary weapon in the game in the form of the Purifier. This weapon does explosive damage and has a semi-automatic fire as well as a charge up mode as well that does a lot of damage. And a little story about this weapon, when this thing was first launched, it was definitely considered the weakest weapon in the game. So a little bit of an underdog story because now it's one of the best primary weapons in the game. And last up for this Warbond, we get the Verdict. This is a sidearm that does medium penetration, kind of like a Desert Eagle, but not really, doesn't punch as hard. But I would consider this kind of a middle of the road sidearm. It's good, not great. So when it comes to ranking the Polar Patriots here, a lot of good weapons and then some real standouts like the Purifier. So I'm gonna have to give this an A tier. Well, gee there, Mr. Nomad, all these Warbonds sure do sound swell. A and S tier rating so far? Gee, we're getting a great value for this game. Don't worry, it's all downhill from here, for the most part. The Viper of Commandos Warbond is next, and the size of this Warbond is kind of the standard going forward, where we start to get stronger themes for the Warbonds, but less equipment overall. Now, on the first page here, we're going to bring up the armor perk here. We get Peak Physique, which will increase our melee damage by 100%, and improve our weapons handling with less drag on weapons movement. That second part of Peak Physique is actually really nice. I mentioned earlier how something like the Jar 5 Dominator, a little bit unwieldy, but if you take this perk with it, ooh, it's smooth like butter, or snappy. It's snappy too. It's smooth and snappy. Anyways, next up on the page that I want to point out is the Liberator Carbine. Now, a lot of people like this weapon. I do not. This weapon has a really fast fire rate that outputs a lot of damage, but with that faster fire rate, the recoil then becomes a problem even with weapon customization. I just think with this weapon, you waste a lot of ammunition and you're going to be reloading constantly. It very much is in the middle of the road where some people love it, some people hate it. On the second page here, we only have one thing that is noteworthy, and that is the secondary slot here, the Bushwhacker. This is kind of like a sawed-off shotgun for your secondary slot. It has two different firing modes where you can fire off a single shell or you can fire them all off at once. Unfortunately, this does have light penetration, but overall I think it's a very solid weapon. And on the third page here, the only tangible thing to bring up is the throwing knife. Now, the throwing knife here is very funny, but it lacks some functionality you would think that would come with a throwing knife, like being able to throw it and then going to pick up that knife. You can't do that in Helldivers 2. So kind of a funny, kind of a niche throwable here, but it's not completely useless. Now, when it comes to ranking this new format that comes with Viper Commandos, the AR we get there, the Carbine, I think it's below average. I think the Bushwhacker secondary is very much middle of the road, and although the knife is fun to use, it definitely sits in its own like niche category. I will say that the armor perk is actually pretty good, but overall I think I have to stick this Warbond in the C tier, which is mediocre and kind of average. Next up, we have our Freedom's Flame Warbond, and this is all about fire.
Turn turning up the heat.
Now on the first page here, let's talk about the armor perk or the armor passive you get, which is inflammable, 75% damage resistance to fire. This is really good against something like the incineration corp, and the occasional time you'll light yourself on fire. What's also on this first page here is the cookout. This is a fire shotgun. Pump action, it's plenty powerful, and of course, yes, it lights your foes on fire. This is a really good primary overall. Moving on to the second page, we get a flamethrower, and like you would imagine, it's a flamethrower, so actually it's really good. This thing can dish out a lot of damage to basically every enemy in the game as long as you're within range. And that's the only really drawback with this weapon is you got to be close because, you know, it's a flamethrower, so yeah. And on the third and final page, we get the secondary in the form of the crisper. This is a really good secondary, kind of like the flamethrower, just in secondary form. Obviously, it doesn't hold as much fuel in its canister, but as a secondary, yeah, this thing gets the job done. Go look up YouTube clips of this thing killing factory striders. It's pretty impressive. I feel like Freedom's Flame here, it's really easy to rank. I think we're just going to stick it into A tier. Next up, we have the Chemical Agents Warbond, and this marks the point where Arrowhead did a rework to the chemical gas effect, and now it's a really good form of crowd control while doing a little bit of damage. First up, let's talk about the armor passive you get with this set here. You get Advanced Filtration. Now, 80% damage resistance to that gas damage. This actually isn't all that useful. The gas damage actually doesn't tick that much. If you're not using this armor, you'll have plenty of time to get out of the gas effect and heal yourself up. But if you want to stay in the gas effect, yeah, you can bring this armor. Now, alongside the armor, we also get our throwable, and this is the gas grenade. This is amazing throwable in my opinion because it does that crowd control effect while doing damage, and this thing can also blow up buildings or close bug holes. So a little bit of crowd control, a little bit of damage, and also does structure damage. On the second page here, we actually get our first stratagem weapon that comes in a premium warbond, and that is the sterilizer. Kind of like the flamethrower in chemical form. This is pretty good. It's just taking a stratagem weapon is a pretty big investment. I'm not saying the support weapon is bad, but I just prefer to get that gas effect from other sources like the throwable grenade. Last page here, we get a secondary in the form of the stim pistol. This is a very, very niche secondary weapon. You kind of have to babysit your other Helldivers if you want to use this effectively, because unfortunately you can't shoot yourself with it. The stim pistol does have a playstyle and a purpose, it's just not a very popular one. And finishing off this page and this warbond, we get another stratagem in the form of the guard dog breath. This is a really good backpack, and unlike the sterilizer, I like this gas effect being spread through the guard dog rather than me having to choose a stratagem weapon for it. It definitely comes down to a personal preference, but just know this stratagem backpack here is really good at keeping you alive and doing crowd control while you do whatever the hell you want. Overall, when it comes to the Chemical Agents Premium Warbond, I think I'm going to stick it in B tier. I think it's above average and very solid. Alright, we're a little bit over halfway. If you guys have made it this far, consider joining the channel, and yeah, let's get back to the list. Our next warbond on the list is the Truth Enforcers. On the first page here, we have a powerful shotgun in the form of the Halt. Now this has two different firing modes. It comes with stasis shells as well as medium penetration fletchet shells. This is actually one out of two shotguns that we have that actually comes with medium penetration ammo. And overall, yeah, this is a pretty solid shotgun. Really not much to complain about. On the second page here, we get a powerful SMG, the Reprimand. Now this is the only SMG with medium penetration ammo. And although this thing has a limited magazine, you almost want to use this like a precision weapon instead of like a traditional SMG. I definitely sit on the side where I really like this SMG overall. And we'll quickly mention the armor here. It comes with the armor passive Unflinching. This is going to reduce our flinching when we are hit and provide a higher armor value, and it helps with marking things on our radar. It's a pretty good armor passive. I just thought it was worth noting here. On the last page here, we do pick up a sidearm, the Loyalist. This is basically like the Purifier in sidearm form. It can function in a semi-automatic fashion, but also has that charge up as well. And I definitely would recommend charging up this weapon because it does have a very limited magazine capacity. But don't get it twisted, this thing's very powerful for a secondary. It's almost like a secondary that can function as your primary if you need it to. So the Truth Enforcers Warbond here, just solid across the board. I'm going to stick it in B tier, probably on the lower end of B tier, but everything in here is just good. Ooh, and up next is the Urban Legends Warbond. This one's a good one. Well, sort of. First page here, let's talk about the armor passive here. We have the Siege Ready. So across the board, this is just a really good armor passive. It's going to increase the reload speed of all your primary weapons and increase the ammo capacity of all your just weapons in general, including stratagem weapons. Now, if a stratagem weapon has, say, a backpack tied to it, like the recoilless rifle, it will not add any additional ammo to that. It has to be something like the AMR, the railgun, the machine guns, something like that. But this is a fantastic armor perk, and once you put it on, it's going to be hard to take it off, especially if you're somebody who likes to rely upon your weaponry. Now next up we do pick up a stratagem. We get the directional shield, and this is, I would say, mediocre, below average. It doesn't protect you as much as you think it should, and the shield itself actually can't absorb that many hits before going down. It's also limited by the fact that you have to be using a one-handed weapon to get this thing to work. And on this page we actually get our first melee weapon. Now let me get the melee weapon discussion out of the way. I think for a majority of Helldivers, melee weapons do not work on the higher tiers of difficulty. There are going to be those crazy Helldivers that can make these melee weapons work, but again, for most people, they just don't cut it, myself included. On the second page here, we actually get a pretty decent booster. Haven't talked much about boosters, but this one I actually think is pretty good. Armed resupply pods. This is going to put a liberator on top of your resupplies. Kind of works like a little mini sentry. Anyways, this can be really helpful. Speaking of sentries, we get the flame sentry. Now the flame sentry can be really good, but there's a lot of like charging enemies, something like a flesh mob or the Terminate's chargers, that absolutely destroy this sentry. And I feel like a lot of the other sentries, you can just put them down and you don't need to babysit them. But the flame sentry here, yeah, you gotta kind of keep an eye on it. And on the third and last page, we pick up the stratagem anti-tank emplacement. This is the first emplacement stratagem that we've gotten, and this one is amazing. If you've ever wanted to have an artillery role, this is the stratagem for you. And I gotta say, it's very satisfying to sit in this thing and just snipe those massive targets across the map. And this is one of the best stratagems to deal with the Leviathans from the Illuminate faction. So overall, when ranking the Urban Legends Warbond here, it has a lot of mediocre things, but the armor passive I think is that good. And I also think that stratagem emplacement, the anti-tank emplacement, are the saving grace of this Warbond. So I think I can comfortably put it into the B tier. Oh, and up next we have the Warbond Servants of Freedom. This Warbond is for the folks who take spreading managed democracy to the next level. Kind of a bunch of psychos. Anywho, first page here, we have an interesting armor perk in the form of integrated explosive. So if you die, this armor will explode and actually does a good bit of damage. Just don't blow up around the illuminated squids. They have like a weird immunity to explosives, but to every other type of enemy, yeah, it'll probably kill them. In addition to that, we get the double-edged sickle. So this works like the regular sickle, except for the longer you fire this weapon, the more damage it'll do. But as a trade-off, the weapon will start to overheat and actually start to do damage to you, eventually lighting your Helldiver on fire. Now this can be countered if you have an armor passive that grants you resistance to fire damage, but this weapon's nature is kind of being a double-edged sword, kind of a risk and reward playstyle, and that's not for everybody. On the second page, we have the ultimatum, and oh baby, this is like a handheld nuke. This is kind of like having a sidearm that has the explosive power of like using a stratagem precision strike. It does have limited ammo, but if you just take the stratagem supply backpack, oh god, you're just going to be nuking everything. And on the last page here, we do have a throwable in the form of the Seeker here. This grenade kind of sucks. Thematically, it's pretty cool to have these propeller grenades that kind of hover around you, but their targeting isn't all that great. So it's like a cool gimmick, but when you actually want it to be effective, it's just very inconsistent. Like sometimes when you mark a target, it'll go after that, and then other times it'll just completely ignore it. And last up, we have another stratagem, the portable hell bomb. Now take note here. This is a meme stratagem backpack, whereas it's hilarious to use, but also very effective. And I want you to remember this because a little bit later on, we're going to talk about a Warbond that is also a meme, but not very effective. So it's like good for like one little laugh, but after that, you're never going to pick it up again. Unlike the Hell Bomb here, where you could take this to any mission and you're just going to have a good time. So when ranking Servants of Freedom here, it has a lot of fun tools and unique playstyles, but some of the stuff is just inconsistent, like the grenade. And then the double-edged sickle, that's just not going to be for everybody. But overall, I think I can safely put this into the B category for solid and above average. And oh, yeehaw! Borderline justice. Just gonna rip the band-aid off this one right here, right now. This is S tier, but I reckon we should get into the how and why of it. First up, we'll go over the armor passive, and that is the Gunslinger. So your sidearm here is going to reload quicker, it's going to ready faster, and it's going to virtually have no recoil. Pair this with the Senator from the Steel Veterans Warbond, and you'll be fanning the hammer like Blondie himself. Next up on the page, we get the R6 Deadeye. This is a medium penetration marksman rifle that just feels and sounds amazing to use. Just truly a precision weapon that is all business and a little bit of fun. Next up on page 2, we get a sidearm, the Las Talon. This is a blaster revolver. This weapon uses a heat sink, so as long as you pace your shots, this thing will never run out of ammunition. And the fact that it has medium penetration kind of makes this better than a lot of the primary weapons. On to the last page, we get a throwable and we get some dynamite. Now this is a nice explosive because the area of effect is pretty big. You can also set a timer on this. Now I'm not trying to say this is the best throwable in the game, but I am saying it does exactly what it's supposed to do. And lastly, and certainly not least, we get a stratagem backpack in the form of the Hover Pack. This is an S tier stratagem backpack. It gives you great mobility, letting you reach high advantage points, and it helps as a reaction tool as well. Like if you get hit, you can immediately jump up to the sky, and against most enemies in the game, you're going to be safe to find a new location to drop while being able to heal yourself or just shoot back. 90% of the builds I make on this channel have a jump pack, and that's just because they're the best, baby. Welcome to becoming a jump diver. I already spoiled this at the beginning, but Borderline Justice is S tier. This is a premium Warbond that is firing on all cylinders. It has a strong theme, a lot of the equipment is best in class, and goddammit, it's just fun. This next Warbond is for you Aura farmers. That's right, it's the Masters of Ceremony Warbond. First page here, let's go over the armor and the armor passive. We have reinforced epaulets. This is actually pretty good armor passive, and it looks snazzy. Next up on this page, we have a marksman rifle. We have the amendment. Now this is a decent marksman rifle. Really the unique feature about this is the bayonet, so you are going to get more melee damage. But I will say out of all the marksman rifles, this is probably the one I use the least. Moving on to the second page, we get the saber. Now this is really cool, but we already talked about melee weapons. So it's not that I dislike melee weapons, but I just can't find myself bringing this onto the higher tiers of difficulty and finding consistent success. Now on to the third page. Remember when I talked about in the Servants of Freedom, all the meme stuff? Well, Masters of Ceremony is that meme Warbond, and look no further than the stratagem weapon we get, the One True Flag. You can kind of use it like a spear, you can plant it in your enemies, and then you can wave it. It's literally a flag that you use as a stratagem weapon. The most I can say about this flag is, when I see somebody else bring it onto a mission, I get a good laugh. The last thing I want to mention on the Warbond is the throwable here, the Pyrotech. This is literally a sparkler, and I'm not even kidding. This is a really ineffective fire grenade, and that's pretty hard to do because fire damage is really good in Helldivers too, but somehow this grenade, it finds a way. Listen, I don't want to shit on the Masters of Ceremony too much, but this is by far the worst Warbond, so it is going into the D tier. But hey, at least they look good in D tier, so that's something. Anywho, so how did the developers decide to bounce back from that last poorly received Warbond? Well, they gave us Force of Law. And it's a Warbond, that's for sure.
I am the law!
Page 1 here, let's talk about the armor. The armor passive here, ballistic padding. This will make you tankier, so a little bit of survivability. That's not a bad thing. But we also get a primary weapon. We get the pacifier. Now this is an interesting weapon because it has that stun and that crowd control effect, but it's also medium penetration and it doesn't do a whole lot of damage. In my opinion, it's just kind of an awkward primary weapon. You might have noticed that the Liberator Concussive and then this pacifier, this crowd control weapon, I'm just not the biggest fan of, but I am a really big fan of the Pummeler, which is the SMG crowd control weapon. Now why is that? I don't know. I'm complicated. On to the second page, we get probably the saving grace of this Warbond, and that is the de-escalator. This is an arc thrower grenade launcher. Because this weapon does arc damage, it ignores armor. This is just a fantastic stratagem weapon for literally killing everything. And the trade-off is, you can't do any structure damage, and you also reload this thing by hand one at a time, as opposed to having a grenade belt like our regular grenade launcher. But overall, I love this stratagem weapon. Now on to the third page. Let's talk about the stratagem backpack here, the Guard Dog K9. This is a guard dog that shoots out an arc bolt, and it'll jump from target to target. It also has a nasty habit of targeting your fellow Helldivers. If you want to be kicked out of a match, bring this stratagem backpack because most players won't deal with a teammate that uses this. Now technically you can micromanage this and stow it for when you're around your allies, but I'd like to counter that statement with, how is your K9 going to zap the traitorous thoughts out of your fellow Helldivers' heads? Bet you didn't think of that one. And the last thing of note for this Warbond is the Urchin here. This is like a thermite, but it stuns instead of killing the enemy. And I don't know about you, if I'm going to use a sticky grenade, I would rather it kill the target, but it's not like the throwable has to be bad. It's just the stunning radius on it, I think, needs to be bigger. Now they did buff this so it'll stun something like a Bile Titan, but again, I'd rather just throw a thermite on it and call it a day. So for ranking the Force of Law Warbond here, it's kind of a mixed bag. You've got some underwhelming things like the Pacifier, you got some hated things like the Guard Dog Canine, but then you have the stratagem weapon, the De-Escalator, which I think is like an S tier stratagem weapon. But I don't think it saves this Warbond overall. I'm gonna have to put it into the C tier. Alright, in the last Warbond for this video, Control Group. On our first page here, I do think the armor passive is noteworthy. We have the Adreno Defibrillator, and this will basically put you into a last stand mode when you take fatal damage. Technically, you can stim yourself to stave off the Grim Reaper, but eventually you will die. Unless you get inside an exosuit or you reach the extraction pelican at the end of a mission. This is a fun armor passive because it gives you a chance to exact revenge before you finally bite the dust. We do receive a primary weapon on the first page with the variable, and this is a really unique primary weapon. This thing has 3 firing modes, so you can treat it like an AR. You can kind of treat it like a marksman rifle with its volley fire mode, but then the 3rd firing mode lets you fire all the ammunition at once, just making it a boomstick that'll literally knock you on your ass. Apparently the Australians came up with this one, so g'day mate. Yeah, I don't do accents on this channel. Crikey. And we sort of have a stacked first page here because we get a stratagem weapon. We get the Epoch. This is a plasma launcher, but it has some glaring issues. Issue number 1 is you can't reload this thing while running. It really feels like you should be able to. And then you can only fire 3 shots before you need to reload. I really think this thing needs to be bumped up to 4 or 5 shots. This one's just kind of frustrating because I see the potential and I really like the plasma weapons in this game. And I feel like it's just a few tweaks from being amazing. Onto this second page, we get a stratagem sentry in the form of the laser sentry. This is actually a really good sentry. It's kind of a workhorse and it has a really short cooldown. And that's really all I have to say on it. This is just a good sentry. Last page here, we get a throwable and we get a stratagem backpack. With the throwable here, we get the arc grenade. Now this thing has a little bit of a consistency issue because when you throw it, it actually bounces around between arc jolts. But more times than not, it does stay in the area that you throw it in and it absolutely goes to town. So a really good throwable here, maybe a little inconsistent. But the star of the show here is the backpack, the warp backpack. This is excellent at moving around the maps. This will get you out of a lot of danger and is almost a must pick for solo Helldivers who are farming super credits because there are these bunkers where you need 2 players to open the door, but with the warp backpack here, you can just teleport right through the door and scoop up all those super credits without needing a friend. This kind of reminds me of the jump backpacks where it just feels really good to have that enhanced mobility. And this is just another example of something that's really effective, but also really fun to use. So ranking Control Group here, if the stratagem weapon, the Epoch, was a little bit better, this would be an S tier Warbond. But I do think it brings it down a bit, so I'm gonna stick it in the tippity top of A tier. Alright y'all, here's the list. We almost have a nice bell curve here. We're a little top heavy, but I think that goes back to what I said at the beginning of the video where a lot of things in Helldivers 2 are completely viable. Even melee weapons, you can make them work. I just think for the vast majority of people, But yeah, I'm pretty happy with this overall. I think I'm going to catch a little bit of flack for putting Viper Commandos so low, but it is what it is. Overall, for the new players and the Xbox players, this should give you an idea of which premium Warbonds to target first. And if you're a veteran Helldiver, let me know your favorite Warbonds in the comments below, and that could also help out people that are looking to get into the game. But one last note, you'll notice that there's another Warbond I didn't mention in here, and that is the free Warbond that every Helldiver gets, and that is the Helldivers Mobilize Warbond. Now this free Warbond is by far the longest Warbond, and as you work through the pages, the cost of medals to unlock things is going to get really high. So I actually don't know if I'd recommend maxing out the Helldivers Mobilize Warbond, because you might be at it for a long time. I'd try to find like a comfortable mid spot and then maybe start looking at the premium Warbonds. But anyways, yes, that's the video. If you made it this far, thank you very much. I appreciate you, and I will see you in the next one. Peace and take care.